Bevy says in our house, my son, right now. We had a 16-year-old daughter, one of our neighbors, to watch him for the night. He's only 10. He also would handle him, how to use phones. We got on one just for the specific reason. You've been able to contact us if something ever went wrong. So you could imagine, when I received the text at 8:57 p.m. reading, Jenny left. But a man is here now. You can bet it was the most terrifying, pulse-pounding moments of my life. My wife and I bolted after dropping a $100 bill on the table and didn't even take a bite of our dinner. In this moment, all I can see in my head is my iPod coming down with a case of chickenpox after searching the sex offenders in our neighborhood. Honey, who is the man? What was he doing? The previous text was sent by his mother as I haphazardly punched the gas pedal to the floor, barreling through red lights and stop signs. The incoming text was even worse. He's sitting on the couch, telling me this on his lap, and scout. Where is your baby, sir? I don't know, I'll have to go. He doesn't want me on the phone. Perspiration dripping down my face, the machine gun heartbeat. My little boy. I one and only baby boy. At this point, I got 2 police cruisers with wailing sirens chasing me through the outskirts of the city. I'm only 8 minutes away, and my wife is telling me that the phone is going to voice. My wife began compulsively calling my neighbor's house until John, Elizabeth's father, answered, telling us she hadn't come home. Call the police and tell them the situation. Tell the operator to make sure they follow us all the way home and don't cess over the tire strip at any point. Then that's when we hit her. The spikes strewn across the road, and the front suspension began to shimmy before we were riding on the rim and had no choice but to stop. Well, not really stop. They smashed into a fire hydrant before a police cruiser skidded to a halt in front of me and pulled his weapon. Exit your vehicle with your hands up, he yelled out aggressively. I did as he asked, hands up, out crying out that my son was in danger. But they paid me no mind. I was arrested then and there, and that's when I noticed that my wife was no longer next to me. In fact, I wasn't even in my car. Whose car we were in? I don't know. You don't remember what the man looked like, whose head you split open with a hammer before stealing his car an hour ago? I don't. Marry you now. Hospital. For this of the accident. You were in one, and said you escaped earlier. You walked right out the front door. I suppose security is to blame for that. What? What is happening? You grinning at them. After you left the house, your old house, where you, your wife, and son lived 6 months ago. You broke into your old house and had killed an old widower who lived there because you believe your son was still there and was in danger. Luckily, it looks like he'll pull through. You're in the hospital, but not for injuries. You know what I'm talking about. Where is my son? My wife? You feel guilty. I can see that. I know you love them. You repeatedly said this to your therapist when you began harboring the thoughts. You think the only way they could be safe is if they're away from you. Where is my family? We can't know until you tell us where you buried them. Back in 2003, I was living with my ex-friend Don and 3 other guys. Don got angry easily. He also fasted frequently and bathed in curved cologne. His shits were enormous. Whilst I walked into the bathroom on him, they was standing on the seat, heading daily at the ceiling, with one 4-foot-long piece of poop coming out like Play-Doh. The good garden hose was shoved up his ass. One time, he walked into the apartment, and only I was there. I was giggling about something that had nothing to do with him. For he happened to walk in just as I was laughing, and he lost his mind, screaming, "You lost at me? Are you lost at me?" I told him no, to which he said, "Good. If I ever catch you that, I'm gonna rape you." That was a sick fuck. Glasses, receding hairline, big chest head with 100-inch waist, thick and ghetto doozy. Anyway, one day we were all having a Mortal Kombat concert. It was whatever new version was out at the time, and Dom just bought the game a few hours earlier. The finale ended up with Dom and another guy named Brooks. Before the end of the game, Brooks said, "Whoever loses has to declare that the other person is the supreme Mortal Kombat champion." Dom agreed. They were reluctant. He had a hard time controlling his anger. Like that time he stopped at a stop sign, was flashing his beams for the lady at the opposite stop sign to go, and when she wouldn't, he threw a hissy fit, shutting off his car and getting outside and histrionic lying across the hood, pretending to sleep. All the time he called the police because we left at him for piss at his pants. When the cop showed up and he told him why he called, he said we assassinated his fucking character. And also that time we committed embezzlement or something, which made no sense, so they don't get scolded and fined our $800 for wasting their time, which was glorious. So, the playing MK. Brooks was crushing Dom. Dom's face was turning red as an apple. He was sick he'd get hunger. And then, it was over. Rush crushed him with scorpion. Be policy. Say it. Say I'm a supreme Mortal Kombat champion. Dom wouldn't say a word. He very calmly hit eject from the Xbox, took out the game and placed it back into the cartridge, and silently walked out the door. "What the fuck are you doing?" Brooks yelled. "The game is defective," Dom said. "What?" asked Brooks. "It's defective. I should have won. The makers should have fixed the glitch. We would have welded." Suddenly, out in the hall, we heard the shattering of glass and screaming like a banshee. We all heard Dom's high-pitched shrieking like a middle-aged woman whenever he would come, and not in this situation. We ran out into the hallway. The window on the floor was shattered, and one of the girls from across the hall from us, who was 3 stories down on the pavement, splattered like a pancake. The cops were called and Doll is still in prison for manslaughter. There was defenses called as to why this happened. Was my friends committed embezzlement. I'm not even sure he knows what the word means. He then resorted to saying, "I plead the egg." Obviously, he represented himself. When he was convicted, he charged the jury before being restrained, screaming, "And then to eat all of your asses." He's currently doing 90 years, up for parole in 50. Baby he'll get out, her age 190. "Just came off the road," Dunn said. "He came out of nowhere. It was night." Second thought, Dunn begun. "Yeah, souvenir." Out from under the seeds, there's a dull hunting, which he handed me. Handle out as he carefully claps the blade. "You gonna pick us up soon, Dad?" "Son, you're in my vehicle. This is my country, and I've got my constitution. If you decide you don't want to abide by it, then it's 1776. Now, you don't want to go back to 1776, do you?" The man was still breathing as I loomed over him, trying to conceal the knife behind me, or he didn't. Just as I was about to do, he opened his phone. That's when the shot went off, his brain sprayed by aerosol from his Dad thought he was calling 911. In actuality, he was showing me a picture of his wife and a little boy. Didn't really make a difference to me. I don't get upset by those things. Even so, I couldn't help saying to myself, "Poor dude, as he twitched and shook out his last breaths, while Dud surveyed off the top of his head. Every one of them probably had families. "Switch me," Dad said. I took the wheel while he washed off his hands and tossed the hairy scalp into the... Just as we pulled away from the dead-skinned family in the middle of the dark, backcountry road, we passed the cop, calling in the opposite direction. Immediately, he hit the lights and peeled to a 180-degree turn after us. We just lost them as we turned a corner. And this is where they shut off the lights and pulled up a long gravel driveway which led to... somewhere. The flashing red and blue hues were coming up at us, so we ditched the vehicle and ran up the rocky path. We pressed through vines that folds along the trail, and we came to an abandoned house. It shouldn't be long before the police find out where we're at, considering there were maybe only a dozen houses in this entire 10-mile stretch of country. An ineffervescent chill rushed through my blood. He crept up to the rotting wood porch, and the broken living room window peering into a pitch-dark skeleton of what used to be a house of a family made me shudder. "I'm not sure I want to do this anymore, Dad." He placed a vice-grip chokehold on my throat and threatened that he'd scalp me by dragging the blade down my cheek, just as we could hear a car crunching along the gravel driveway towards us. The door opened without any effort, and I was the first to go in. I shrieked when I saw a naked person scatter and bolt up the staircase to the second floor. "Someone's in here," I whispered. Dad just pressed the tip of the knife into my shoulder blade, but I didn't hesitate to keep going. "Why don't we just hide in the woods?" I murmured. "Someone's coming up the driveway." Dad didn't speak. He was essentially steering me with the knife in the direction of that dark, dreadful staircase. The one I just watched a demented, nude stranger boltle. "He's come to meet me, Colt, those stairs." "There's someone already up there. I'll scream if I have to," I shouted. He pressed the tip of the knife into my cheek and slashed as hard as he could, while a spurt of blood like a projectile chipped spiderweb-covered wall. I put my hand over my cheek, screeching in pain, wiping away the blood, and quickly ran to the steps and began my ascent. Halfway up, Dad began to speak, just as the flashing blue and red lights approached the home. "Fuck, they're here. Why are we in this? Son, start with the Inquisition. When you get to the top, turn right. Has that been here before?" I did as he said when the police car grinded to a halt and shut off its engine. Just as the car door slammed, Dad stuck his head out of the broken second-story window upon reaching the top and shouted in a loud whisper, "Colby, up here!" I only glanced, but out of the back seat, the officer began pulling something out of the vehicle. The body of the man we killed and scalped. As I turned the corner, and it said there was only one decrepit, chipping white door at the end of the hall. Like something out of a horror movie, the hinged piece of revolving doom stared me down the closer I got, infusing my soul with unrelenting. Dad was in cahoots with the police, I'm certain, and is going to kill me, just like he did my sister. Someone is waiting fully in that room, which is probably a perfect place, a vacant house, to hide dead body. My sister disappeared 6 months ago, without any explanation to why. That seemed busted up over her, but I know now it was only a ploy. In a matter of seconds, my feet were planted in front of the door, which was already cracked open. Yes, a tiny gap in the door sent chills for my spine. "I'm going to see Sis's dead body in here. I know her, and the police are here to make sure it's covered up," I said to myself. But when I opened the door and then shone the flashlight, my heart skipped upon 10 beats, and I screamed. It was my sister, very pale, kneeling down in the corner like some animal, her greasy brown matted hair hanging over her face, as she moved her limbs in a disquieting, lightning-quick frenzy. That must soak. My body went stiff when she looked up at me, blood cascading down her chin and neck, soaked in red up to her elbows, still wearing her pink pajamas from the night she disappeared. My eight-year-old sister was literally consuming a rotting dog carcass like a starved coyote. "Stop!" yelled Dad as she stood up, growling like some sort of demon. Her irises glowing yellow and her skin so pale, it was nearly translucent. I couldn't even look at her, and in a moment of disassociation, I focused on a moth lingering around the rim of a flashlight. "It's okay, Stacy, baby. It's okay. It's William, your brother." I wanted to scream and run when she hurriedly began crawling towards me on all fours like a dog, before clutching my shirt, pulling herself up to eye level, and began sliding her tongue up and down the bloody abrasion on my face. I gritted my teeth and pressed shut my eyelids until I nearly had a migraine. "Okay, Stacy, that's enough. It hurts. It hurts," she growled in a raspy whisper. "Eat to get reacquainted. I'll be right back." I couldn't remotely compute the abject horror standing before me. I could only stare at her in the moment. His scowl faded to a sad frown when the inevitable realization washed over her innocent, youthful face. The scene just sucked the blood out from Big Bro's cheek. And just then did I hear the two men lumbering up to the top of the stairs. As I shone the light around the room, I noticed that, despite the home being an aging, decaying vessel, the room was set up with a bed, pink sheets, and my sister's old posters that were up in her room before she went missing. This is her home now. This dead wooden sarcophagus in the middle of nowhere. But her eyes, those awful, jaundice-laden, bloodshot eyes, looked like pure evil. I shone the light around the room, only to discover several cadavers whose guts have been hollowed out by my sister's recently grown canines protruding from her upper lip. A floor covered in toys and teddy bears, scattered around pungent, foul-smelling dead bodies. There were 6 of them, all missing their scalp. Finally, the men reached the top of the stairs, turned to the corridor, and came into the room, dropping the body to the floor of our recent kill. And I watched in shock and horror as my sister dug into his stomach like a hungry coyote. My dart had sliced him down the middle when the night. Out the door stood Dad and the sheriff. "Son, this is Sheriff Colby. I can see in your face, so let me just explain. I scout them so the police know it was me who did it, and not a murderer who would turn into an entire caseload for the police." I became a bit distracted by the flecks of blood and muscle splashing all over my pants, while my ridiculous sister, hyperventilating with eagerness, opened up the body and began tearing out it in like she used to rip into presents on Christmas Day. White to Lafitte. They couldn't hold back. "You want to kill me," they spelt it up. "I planned all of this, son. I needed you to see, to believe. I can't tell you, Mom, and neither can you, ever. Which is why I had to bring her all the way out here. Mom can never find her." "How did she get like this?" I don't know, William. Something in the woods behind the house. Stacy, how did this happen to you?" She briefly glanced over me, with intestines hanging from her mouth, like blood-soaked linguine, before burying her face back into flesh-covered strawberry pie. She's not going to talk to you. To say goodbye, William. But I didn't want to leave, and somehow, any dad was indirectly responsible for allowing my 8-year-old sister to run free through the woods that day. He should have been wanting her, especially after knowing the livestock in our farm had begun to turn up skinned and fully trained of blood, with fang punches on their necks. So, I did something I needed to do, to punish him for tilling my sister and best friend into a monster. This is on you, I spat. I spastically reached my arm into the freshly killed vessel, and then, like a hungry lion, she angrily sunk her fangs into my arm, just as my dad cried out, "Stop!" It was then I glazed into my dad's eyes with a hate-filled expression, said one last thing. "Now, you've got to roll this. I've been in this room, starving with my sister, for the last 3 days. My limbs are freezing, and my thoughts The infection is slowly tearing me into her. I write this now because the police just pulled in, and are outside loading their shotgun. I guess, in the end, it would be easy for them to kill us both, than to continue to find victims for us to feast on. But Sally the truth, I don't think the weapons will do much good, because neither of us are really alive. They can't kill something without a pulse. When I was about 8 years old, our town held a county fair. You know, those summerly rituals filled with the scent of corn dogs and deep-fried Oreos. With roller coasters so ratty, they were lucky to come away with only a sprained neck. Anyways, there was nothing unusual about it. It was a year like any other, except for a clown on stilts. I've always been freaked out by men on stilts. Something about this stiff-necked gait is just disquieting. The fair closed out around 9:30 p.m. We went back to our house, which is a farm. It was late August, only a month before harvest, and we had a sprawling field. I used to go to bed around 11:30. I left our German chef in Baxter one more time to pee. He barked a few times, most likely a deer or raccoon, and just as I let him, I heard something off from the distance. It was the sound of corn stalks crunching and breaking, one after another, in strides. "And Lon?" said Alf. Sound halted. The sudden stoppage of the noise is what unsettled me most. I hit the floodlights, but couldn't see anything as far as the light went. Then the noise resumed, crunching as before, only it sounded further away. However, the other thing which rang out was something of a tune or song. I ran to the barn to flick on that light. I could only see the dark silhouette of the figure among the trees. It was just standing there. But it wasn't any normal figure. It stood a good 15 feet in height. Short arms, small head, and extremely long limbs. I moved closer, hand on my pistol, our parents' trader's own, flashlight in hand. And when I shone it on the figure, I thought it'd have a heart attack. It was the old man on stilts, out in the middle of my family's cornfields at 11:30 at night, 2 hours past upstairs closing. Only his face wasn't painted with a clown anymore. Shaking and palm sweating, I cried out, "What the hell do you want?" They could see his long, unkempt grey beard, but his eyes were shielded by the shadows of the trees. I didn't want to see them. He didn't reply with an answer, for the odorous, foreboding tune from before. Oh, wee, oh, whoa, whoa, over and over again, like the Wiccan Witch's gods in The Wizard of Oz. He said nothing else. He turned back around upon confrontation and lumbered side to side with that unsettling stiff gait, out beyond our property, into the woods. That was the last night of the fair. We would start school again in 2 days. When I told my parents about him, they wouldn't believe me. They felt it was just a joke. I asked around. To this day, nobody can tell me who that guy was. Life went back to normal after that. However, a few years later, I experienced the same noises at the same time. I turned on all the outside lights on again and ran else into the cornstalks. All I could see the silhouettes of leafless trees, except one of them seemed a little out of place, and a little too tall. What was most odd was it only had 2 branches, one on each side, where arms grass oak. This time, I didn't investigate. I just didn't want to know. Polden were writing Arnold Tolstoy. This was an incredibly stressful, painful piece to get through, and I've been traumatized since, and in therapy. I was always a frail old tiny gal, and uncomfortable alone in public. Many things scare me, but most especially the idea of being abducted or tortured. With that in mind, we'd all. One day, I stole something of more. I was 16. Not a big deal. It was just a scrunchie. I hid the cardboard it was attached to and sat it behind a bunch of paper towels. And then, on the way out in the store, I was pulled aside. "Come with me," a large, imposing man croaked in a deep baritone voice, with an expressionless, apathetic look on his face. "I'm sorry, what's this about?" "Theft," he said. "Fuck. They had me on camera." "I'll just pay and leave," I told him. But he said nothing, just tightened his iron grip around my tiny arm. And when I say iron grip, I meant it, like on vice. We walked through 2 plastic doors into the storage area and stopped atop a set of stairs. When he flicked on the light, they were leading to the basement. I couldn't see beyond the bottom step because it was pitch dark. "Let's move," he sped angrily. I began stepping down the staircase as I heard wham, the door slamming shut behind me. I turned and feverishly tried to open it, but it was locked. I figured they were just holding me until police came, so I made my way to the bottom. The room was dank, wet and dusty, covered in cobwebs. What was the most bothersome is how dark it was, and the fact there were no people down there, but there was an old wooden chair in the middle of the room, and handcuffs attached to teens, which ran to the bricked wall. "Where are the cameras, the loss prevention guys, the freaking manager?" I screamed to myself. It smelled like mildew and something else, like rotting bee, coming from the far side of the room, the darker side, where I didn't want to go. And decided to sit on the bottom step, and thoughts began racing, most especially about the man who brought me down here. He looked disheveled. He wasn't wearing normal attire. He was in what looked like some cheap, phony police uniform. I noticed his FOP shoulder badge partially unstitched, his hands covered in dried mud, and the scent of intense BO. "Footbess." I pulled out my phone and called the store. I transferred myself to speaking with monitor. "Thank you for calling Walmart. This is Destiny. May I help you?" "Yes, I'm stuck in a gas basement. A man grabbed me, told me he was in loss prevention and that I stole something, and brought me down here, and I can't get out." Suddenly, the door to the basement opened, and I heard the sound of whistling, and the creak, creak, creak of the wooden stairs. I backed to the corner and picked up the chair, ready to use it as a weapon. The man and another, even older man, The former Paulinus 40s and the latter in 60s also, both emerged the bottom stairs with huge, wide-eyed grins on their face, with the men in the security uniform twirling a basin. "Have a seat in the chair and baby cakes," he said creepily. My skin was crawling, the heart pounding, still it crazy. "Be tight." "They'll bet you are," he said, as the old man began rubbing his crotch, both slowly inching closer to me, before unzipping, and then, well, you know. I held the chair out like I was ready to swing. Tight and where aid you. I wants to die. I said the only thing I could. "I'll fucking kill you." "She's gonna kill us," he said, turning and speaking to the older man, harshly laughing. "She thinks our rickety old chair'll do something." He, the smarmy, slyly old snake giggled with a voice full of phlegm, which he spat on the floor. The old man took off his shirt and belt, and wrapped the bellows around his knuckle. "Doll's gonna die. Die is until... Hello? Anyone down there?" The man, startled and freaked out, ignored me from running to the dark opening, some door, and exiting out into the woods. And door which set off the store's fire alarm. An employee came down to talk to me. Destiny, the active monitor. The theft was glossed over. I was only able to identify the monomer security uniform. The other, well, I didn't see him on camera, which they went through with me. The rustling smell was a dead dog, which nobody had answers for. "Let me give you a piece of advice," she continued. "From now on, only trust a person in a Walmart uniform." I understand. "Oh, by the way, I'm a loss prevention officer is upstairs. The nay, when not found, and missed, not get." "32 years ago, child named Audrey went missing in my city. She was on her way home from school when she was abducted. She was 6 years old. The case went cold and was forgotten about for 28 years. She was assumed to be dead. Fast forward to 2015. There was an old man living near my local high school named Harold. Nobody ever really came to see him, all in a nurse and family. He'd sit outside on his deck with his oxygen tanker mask all day and chain smoke. He was known as just a cantankerous old goat, so nobody ever spoke to him. Because of his combative personality and perpetual scowl, local hooligans would egg his house and decorate his pine tree with toilet paper now and again. One night, we drove by the high school to see ambulances and police cars blocking Forest Avenue. So many lights, they could have seen it from space. The police received an emergency call to Harold's house. When they arrived, his granddaughter was sitting on his porch, crying and acting hysterical, begging may save him. Harold was found with his tongue cut out. They rushed into hospital before he could bleed to death, while his granddaughter kept screaming the words, "I wish I could have stopped though." The perpetrator was Audrey. She'd been living alive all this time, even living on her own. However, she was so brainwashed by him that she continued to take care of and perform sexual favors for him. Unto this day, she finally snapped. Audrey was his granddaughter. All that time, she was so indoctrinated, she continued to serve him, even with the ability to move away and do whatever she wanted. I'm writing the story mostly to tell you how it ended. She was shipped to a psychiatric hospital, where she still lives to this day. She might never be of mentally or physically. It's sad. Harold ended up another way. He was given the rest of his natural life in prison for her abduction and torture. He died in his sleep, before he served a single moment. He was 83. When asked why she cut out his tongue, she said, "And he goes to prison, he shouldn't be up to." She planned it out. There were over how much time, we won't ever know. He died peacefully, and she still resides in a psych ward, scarred full. She said she wants him dead, but at the same time, loved him deeply. Around as an old. I hope for someday she goes home, that her real